Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host at Jack Greenstock on Cannabis as well as Instagram. You can find me at Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. Thank you everyone for coming to another week of our weekly live show on YouTube. Soon enough, I'll be uploading these onto the podcast platform. I'm working with the former host, Shane of Cheap Home Grow, to make sure that we can get that happening for all the people that have requested it. So shout out to everybody who listens live here on YouTube, and also shout out to anybody who is hoping for this to come back onto the podcast. We're trying to make that happen as soon as possible. I'm already muted over here on my end on the YouTube. I'm going to remind everybody to click on over to the live chat if you have not done that already, so you can see all of the messages in the chat, like Smart Poker, who said hello, and Real Red Hairs. But I want to take my time right now to let Tao into the room and also say welcome, Spartan Grown.
Hello, everybody. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces. And the same thing for email. I'm on Gmail, so Spartan Grown at Gmail. If you want to get me on email, if you don't have an Instagram, I've had a few people make Instagram accounts just to try to send a message out to me. So I want to make sure I get the email out there for those folks too. You don't have to sign up for Instagram to talk to me.
That is very nice of you to put that out there. And definitely, if people don't want to sign up for Instagram, that's cool that you're saving them that time and that stuff, because there's some private things that a lot of people don't feel comfortable with about Instagram and just social media in general. They might not want to be a part of it. So email is something a lot more accessible to the people. So shout out to you, Spartan Grown, and shout out to the people. If you want to get in touch with me on email, you could do jgreenstock@gmail.com or jackgreenstock47@gmail.
Oh, you froze.
Oh, that's not good when the host freezes.
Gmail.com. Both of those will work. Next up, we have
He's back.
Matthew Gates. If you, I must have froze, but I was trying to introduce you. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Sorry about that, everybody. But I'm going to throw it over next to Matthew Gates.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I'm an integrated pest management specialist. For those who don't know, I recently published an article on Skunk Magazine about the cannabis microbiome, which is an interesting topic that I'm very interested in seeing more research about. And you can find a bunch of pest management and plant physiology videos on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, the same one I'm commenting in the chat, as well as on my Instagram at SyncAngel, which is also my Twitter handle at SyncAngel.
Thanks again for joining us. I think that article is something that translates really well to a written article. Sometimes it's hard to talk about that stuff at length, but writing it down and having all that information there with all the sources and everything is really great. So shout out to you and cheers to you for getting published in that magazine. Really awesome stuff. I'm going to throw it over next to Aaron the Grower.
Yeah, I was distracted. Brandon's giant tree he's bucking down in front of us.
I was going to toss it to him, but I was like, oh, he's
like
not
watching
going to unmute right now.
It's like watching a girl undress and I'm supposed to just talk about. Okay, yeah, let's see. I am Aaron the Grower. I just got a YouTube channel going. So a lot of drama with that. I had trouble recording. I got everything figured out, so I'm going to be pumping out some episodes soon. I am the inventor of the plant packer. So check that out on my website, atgacres.com. And it's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us, Jack. And good to see everyone on the panel and in the chat.
Good to see you, and it's good to be seen. Happy to be healthy and able to come and join this show. I know some of the other regulars are have other obligations this week that they are tending to, so they're either going to be late or not make it. But I'll focus on the ones who are here and pass it next to the American one.
Hello, Jack, panel, everyone in chat. It's great to be here. I'm the American one on YouTube and the American one _with_Ekeens on IG. And since we're putting out the emails, I guess I'll give you mine, schles@aol.com. If you want to send me an email for some reason, and just put TAO in the subject so I won't straight out delete it. And I'm glad to be here. Oh, and by the way, Matthew Gates, that was a really incredible post on that rice. I'm really interested in asking you a couple questions tonight. So good to be here.
Good to have you, and definitely save them because we're going to start off with a little question, but I'll talk a little bit more about that after I let Brandon introduce himself. Brandon, welcome.
What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust. If you guys aren't familiar with me, you can find me on Instagram at Rust Brandon, just like the icon there. I own Bokashi Earthworks, biological fertilizer company. I specialize in a special consortium of microorganisms that really helps cycle nutrients. It really helps the availability of phosphorus and manganese, for two great benefits that I'm seeing through testing, and I have the test results to prove that. I'll be sharing those in February along with some other education I'll be doing with the science of cannabis and cultivation. And since, I'm a big proponent of giving education away for free, this is a paid speaking, so I'm going to give away my proceeds to like a charity or something like that, because I don't really need to get paid to help other people understand how to live better. I guess that's just
Cheers to that, man. I mean,
that should be free.
I wanted to say I just used your Microbe Plus and the Amino N Plus last night in my waterings. The plants are loving it, always do. Also wanted to ask, because myself and the chat are dying to know, what's that big plant that you were just bucking down?
Oh, okay. So, as you guys know, I have a friend who has been breeding for a really long time. He's still anonymous, he's an older dude, and he gave me a library, basically a small library of seeds, and he was the creator of a variety called Trainwreck Blueberry. It was the original Trainwreck cut crossed with one of the first seed drops, the very first seed drop DJ Short ever did, which was F4 Blueberry in 1998. He had a pack of that, and he found a beautiful, beautiful male out of that pack, and he hit everything that he had with it. So he crossed Trainwreck, Romulan, Bull Rider, P91, Super Silver Haze, Marijuana, a bunch of old stuff. And he was running that cut. I ran that cut, Blueberry Trainwreck cut, for a long time. And a couple years later, in I think 2001, or no, maybe it was 2003. 2003, he had some MK Ultra from, I think, TH Seeds Amsterdam, and he found a really good male in that. And then all the stuff that he currently had, he hit with that. So Trainwreck, Blueberry, MK Ultra. I was running a bunch of phenos, and I decided to hit it with a Mac V2 because I found a really nice male in a pack. Actually, it was kind of strange. I have a no seed buying policy, and I actually bought a pack of this thing, first pack of seeds I've ever bought, and I got 11 males out of a pack.
That's
One
the
female.
dealer's fucking, luck of the draw sometimes.
I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. So I took all my, I had all these males, and one of them, I was so disappointed it wasn't female because it was looking so nice. So I was like, well, fuck it. Took it home with me and crossed it into 5 different phenos of the Trainwreck Blueberry MK Ultra. And this one particularly is very much, it leans, the terpene profile very much leans on the Trainwreck Blueberry. I don't get much of the MK in it at all. I have a couple phenos that aren't that great, which I'll probably just set aside. I might test them out. But these ones here, I'm going to run because they're real oily, super terpene rich. They had really good frames on them. They stacked real well and had really long, I have another plant in there that's huge. The cola on it was probably about maybe 2 feet long.
I'm excited that I have some of those Blueberry Trainwreck MK Ultra across.
The Blueberry Trainwreck MK Ultra
That you sent me, at least that portion of it, not hit with the Mac.
That was...
Sorry, I just wanted to go ahead, and my internet connection is unstable. I wanted to give Sour Diesel Tangy a chance to jump in. He's a special guest this week. You probably know him from the chat here on YouTube. You can also find him on Instagram. But welcome, Sour Diesel Tangy.
Hey, everybody. Sour Diesel Tangy. First shot at a podcast, so if I do anything super wrong, you can email me at sourdieseltangy@gmail.com and let me know what how bad it really was. That being said, Sour Diesel Tangy, Mass, legal home grower, been here since the horrible, corny music episodes from Shane, where he had that weird intro. Let's see. Running Cocoa, Run Forever
Forgot
Green
about that.
Indoors Lights. You forgot about that? How could you forget about that?
Oh, they're all deleted now. I guess that's how you could forget. Shit.
Oh, they
But
are? Oh, that's too bad.
on
I'll
a
find
positive
that.
note, you had a question for breeders in general, but I think
did.
specifically in relation to Brandon, who was just talking a little bit about some of his breeding projects.
I did have a good question. I don't know if it's public knowledge or anything, but I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. Brandon reached out to me, asked me if I wouldn't mind being a tester. I said I'll dedicate half my garden to Brandon's gear. And my question was, what's it take in the panel's eyes to be a good tester? What's the expectation as far as plant count? What kind of notes do you want to take? You want us to be accurate, I imagine, with just about everything. And what's the best way to get that information to a breeder so that they can use it to kind of gauge their gear and better the product, or, and if something goes wrong, what's the best way to communicate that to the breeder without, I would imagine directly, if something goes weird, they want to know, they're not asking you to test to blow smoke. They want to know how it's going, I would imagine. So that's
Totally. I think
pretty much the question.
since Brandon offered to send you some gear, I'd love to hear Brandon's response first, and then maybe the American one, who's also sent out testers, and I sent out 700 last year myself. So I'll jump in there after these two guys. Go ahead, Brandon.
I didn't. I don't have high expectations. It's really just a matter of people growing them out, seeing how they like them, make sure that there's no intersex instability. I'm running a bunch of stuff too right now, different stuff, some of the same stuff, but it's good to gauge like across the board, because people have different styles than I do. People, you want to see how things do in different systems. One of the coolest things that I got to experience was watching all the home growers grow out the same cut for the grow competition, and watching kind of different styles of cultivation, and then seeing the end product as far as testing. I don't expect testers to get things tested and stuff like that. I just think that for me, it's just, yeah, dude, everything's cool. I don't even care if I got pictures or not. If you're like, oh yeah, everything's cool, didn't have any problems. No,
It's they'd be the best tester ever if they sent a lab test. I'll say that. Anybody who sends a lab test as a tester, that'd be pretty fucking above and beyond, I think, for most people. Sorry.
Yeah, it is
I've
pretty
done that
cool.
for all my tests. I've done that.
Yeah. It's it's really up to them. I mean, I reached out to him because I see that he has a good home grow setup, and I don't know, he had asked a question or something, it was just there. It's just one of those things. It was like a spur of the moment type of thing, because sometimes that's what I'm like, I was literally shucking up seed, and I was like fucking around on Instagram, and he's say, he like commented or something, I don't know, and I was like, yeah, dude, I got some seeds if you want to run them, so yeah, it's just kind of a
Right place, right time kind of thing. I mean, sometimes that tells people you got to shoot your shot. Sometimes all the testers that I got, other than one, I applied to be a tester. There was an application put out. I sent some photos of my grow and my space and my experience, etc. And they said, sure, we'll send you some seeds. The one time was
Yeah.
a gift from a friend, but I want to pass it over to Tao and ask him what he expects of a tester and
Well,
his thoughts in
I'll
general.
start out by saying that the first time I made seeds, I was so nervous to give them to anybody because I didn't want to have them end up herming out and messing up their garden. So, but I did, and I sent out a ton. And I think the best thing to do is get them in the hands of like everyone, the rookies, because a lot of people, I want a tester that knows what he's doing, but the people that know what they're doing don't there's going to be people that don't know what they're doing that are going to end up with your seed. So I wanted to get them to everybody. So a whole bunch of people, first time growers, people that didn't even have a garden yet, I actually sent some out to. So, and people that are broke, you know, people that have no money, don't have a way to get seeds. I like hooking them up, and I try to run everything that I make in house first. So at least I know it's not just ridiculously bad, or, you know, at least it germs. But now that I'm making more and more, I don't have the room to do big runs of all the ones that I want to. So that's another reason why I like sending them out. And I mean, from the feedback, basically what I want to hear is, dude, that was the best shit I ever fucking grew and smoked. I want more. That's what I want to hear. But other than that,
You're
I want
probably
general
happy
info.
with it didn't herm though, right?
Yeah. And I want general info, you know, like the smells. Was it how was the high? Was the structure of the plant good? Was the yield all right at least?
To Tao's credit, though, he put out a post and he
anything-
said, "Has anybody ever had a herm from my gear ever?" And he sent out a bunch of seeds, and everybody replied, said, "No, all my shit's been good.
Yeah.
Everything's good."
But I know that if you want to, or if you really try it, well, you can make it herm, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you know, that was just in general. And some people I've heard have, you know, they couldn't even get with the silver sulfate stuff. They have problems making stuff herm, certain ones.
Certain things are harder
But
to
it
reverse than
happens,
others, for
right?
sure.
It's harder, but you can make it happen. But so yeah, basically that's it. Just general info, and if they would want to do it again, you know, that's pretty much it for me. That's what I want to know.
So I sent out like 700 seeds, which is 70 10 packs. 100 of those were to veterans, which I don't expect anything of. It's just a thank you for their service, because, I mean, they served our country and they deserve it. There's no two ways about it. Like, they didn't pay shipping, they didn't pay anything. I said, if you're a U.S. veteran, let me know on Veterans Day and I'll send them out. And I still feel that way for a veteran. If you want to reach out to me, I'll put this one little justification. Like, at this point, I will ask for a little bit of proof, just so I'm not sending out seeds to everybody who just says they're a veteran, like a picture of you in your uniform or some sort of ID or something like that. But other than that, the 600 others went to just people in the grow community. And on shows like this, I would occasionally say, hey, I've got this cross. I grew out the F1s, Velvet Punch, from my buddy Vegan Doja, who sent them to me as a gift. And like Brandon or like Tao just talked about, he said, you want people to say like, this is the best shit ever. That's how I felt about Doja's first cross. And I didn't make seeds with it, or didn't take any cuts of it. So the second cross I grew, which was Velvet Punch, I was like, shit, this is amazing. I'm going to make seeds with it. Like, I'm not going to make that same mistake. I had some males, had beautiful females, and chose the best male, called everything else, and made F2s, shared those with the community. People like Spartan Grown are currently growing them. The American one is currently growing them. Anybody who asked me, I sent them to, if they were in the US. International, unfortunately, had some difficulty with paperwork and things like that. I have found out since there are international stamps, so I might be opening up my testers international for the F3. But with that being said, my expectation, I guess, would be grow them eventually, hopefully before I make like the F3. It's like a year-long process for me. I watched a lot of other testers grow them. I germination tested a few different batches with a few different things, and everybody that did grow them got really good germination rates, so they like reported that. I'll say this, probably most breeders don't want a lot of like photos in veg. Like, it's cool to like see how many popped. I'll say that, like, germ rate is a good photo to send over, but like to send an update every single day in veg is probably overkill. Like a few times, maybe once a week or once a month in veg. Once it gets to flower, maybe a weekly update would be really cool. I think it's awesome that Spartan gets his stuff sent to a lab and sends over lab results, but that's totally above and beyond. I sent a letter with my seeds. At the beginning, I was actually printing out a copy and like sending it to the people. I would write the number that the mom came off of, like 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then I'd write a description about that mom, and then like all the genetics, the background, and how I made the seeds and what I expect like from them, like how they're going to grow and smell and look. And then also what I sort of expected of them, which was grow them how you normally grow anything. A lot of people are like, I want you to grow it untopped in a 1 gallon pot in a sea of green, all 10 of them as fast as you can, flip them when they're 12 inches. I'm like, I have no expectations. Like, if you signed up to be a tester, I want you to grow them how you'd grow them in your environment, because I want to see how they're really going to do. Like, if you wanted to grow them again and again and again. So my only recommendation was, if you feel like sending photos over to me, like, that's super awesome. If you want to grow them out, that's awesome. I sent out, like I said, 700 seeds, 70 10 packs, and less than 10 people are growing them. So it just gives you an idea of the amount of people, and they've been out for, I mean, people have harvested. I'll say that. Spartan's pretty late in flower. Tao's got some in veg, but like 3 or 4, maybe 5 different people have harvested, and I'm in the process of making the F3s right now. So they've been out there for a while, and most people that get the testers, because they are free, I'll say this, like when I pay for something, I'm more invested in it. So I'm more likely to like pop it and grow it. When you get something for free, it usually sits on the seed bank. And then sometimes you're like, oh, I grew this, and like that freebie ended up being fucking fire, or that tester ended up being fire. And that was the case with me. I grew some testers, loved them. And when I got a tester for free, I felt really obligated. But that's just how I am as a person. Not everybody feels that way. And I understand that. And I also understand that people don't have unlimited plant counts and unlimited space. So they'll get to it when they get to it. So
Jack, it'll be good though. Like once a few people start growing out your gear and it works out good, and other people have your beans already, the testers, when they see that plan on IG or whatever, then they'll be like, yeah, I'm going for that one next. So you'll see it snowball probably, because it seems like it's all good so far, what I've seen on IG. And
I've reposted everyone who's tagged me with a flower shot. I will literally repost them, like whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But everybody's really seemed to find really good stuff. It's a lot of purple, a lot of grape, a lot of gas, which is exactly what I was looking for. So I'm happy with what the testers are posting so far. Spartan, it looks like you wanted to jump in there. You are actually growing now.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's kind of out of laziness, but it's still, I think it's a great way to give updates to the breeders, is like I've been doing with you. I just go and shoot a video. That way I can talk and say what I like about it, what I don't like. I can show you exactly what I'm speaking of. I don't have to like circle things on pictures and things like that. And it's just way more natural, and you can get it across in a minute or less, right? So
if a picture is worth 1,000 words, fuck a video where you're describing and walking through the garden and you're like, this one smells this way, this is the more floral, this is the more grape, and like this one's got a smaller bud structure and this one's got a bigger bud structure. What we just said there in 10 seconds of talking, that's like 40 messages and like an hour of back and forth in DMs. So I definitely highly agree with Spartan's advice. If you want to effectively communicate, if you're able to do that in your garden, which I think most of us are, it's like our private personal space. We can fucking talk to the plants, talk to ourselves, or talk to our buddies on Instagram. And that's a great way to go about doing it. I want to throw out there to Aaron the grower. Have you ever tested anybody's genetics for them, or gotten like seeds as freebies and grown those out? And how's it worked out for you?
I've got a lot of freebies, but like you, they tend to go in the seed bank. I've their stuff tested immediately, and I have this obsession with clones. I am like a proved genetic collector. It's sort of like my hobby, I guess, in the world of growing. So I prefer that than popping seeds. That said, I love growing from seed because you get these healthy, vigorous plants, and you have something that nobody else potentially has, or something that maybe only very few people have. But
well, literally no one has it. If you grew it from seed, that's your pheno. It's a unique, it's like a child. Like you could have 100 kids from the same family in theory, but like no two of them are going to be exactly the same. So they might be similar looking and act, a lot alike, even have like similar mannerisms, but sometimes they're completely different from the same breeder, same batch, same everything.
Totally. Genetics can be totally different. But I mean, like, you could get a almost an identical chemotype, or like genotype, not genotype, but chemotype. Your genotype's going to be slightly different, but you could have like these really essential markers that can come up in a lot of, and that's what stability is, I guess, is when you see that in that progeny often. But I've resisted it because I like to store seeds, dude. I have like a quarter of my fridge is just dedicated to seeds. And when you're talking seeds, they're like this tiny. It's a lot of seeds. I've invested a lot of money, and they just sit because I want to wait till my grow is perfect to pop seeds, man. I made a post about this a couple of years ago, and it's just like, you don't want to like hatch your best chickens when your coop isn't built. And sort of that's what I'm dealing with.
I feel like that's a pretty. I'm biased. I'm kind of similar. I'm sure much to Brandon's chagrin, because I still have some of his really great seeds, and it's a different sort of context. But I'm curious, Aaron, would you be, since you're going to be growing in a much different capacity soon, or still are, or are currently, do you think you'll be cracking a couple more?
Oh yeah. I got eyes on whatever Brandon's going to be working on. I'm obviously going to come to his farm and like get handed whatever he's like, but yeah,
Smart
I'm
man.
super excited.
Smart man.
Yeah, I'm super excited to like work with the exclusive Oklahoma genetics and the stuff I got in my fridge. You know, that'll come in handy one day. But I
What
just want
genetics are exclusive to Oklahoma?
this guy right here.
Uh,
Not that they're exclusive; you can get him anywhere. But you know, when you know him and you go to his farm, I think that's the exclusivity.
that's the good feeling right there. That's the getting it from the guy who grew them first, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you can actually let your nose do some of the deciding then, because Brandon has a huge pheno hunt
True.
going on at a few different properties, and he's also done some big pheno hunts and selected some killer winners. And although they're winners for him, they might not be the thing that you would select first, you know, and if he's even willing to share it. But he's
Well,
definitely got
okay,
some.
so here's the thing, right? So there's stuff because so what I've done is basically, I have stuff that I run only at maybe the indoor spot and then the light depth, and then I have stuff that might only be at a partner's farm, someone that I'm working with, So there's like stuff that's kept exclusive. That way there's not any type of market competition. But there's all kinds of stuff like the sour cheeseberry, for instance, which is something that I run commercially, which is awesome. I mean, this is what I'm smoking on. This is like what I love to smoke, and it's
Yeah, I've been
fucking
drooling over that.
awesome.
You've been posting it in your stories and stuff, dude. I've been drooling over that thing. Like, what the fuck is that? It's such a large bud set on that, and it's like it's almost scary how big. It's almost like outdoor looking fucking bud.
Well, it's really interesting because it produces really nice colas, and the structure is really great. So it has these really swollen calyx, and it turns all these beautiful colors. And the crazy thing is, it has all of uh, these terpenes in a really high concentration that you don't typically see, like delta 3 carrying. Um, uh,
Osamine.
Osamine. I posted that was one of the cool things. I gave this out. This was one of the cuts that I gave out for the home grow competition. So I got to see across the board, how it fluctuated a little bit, but the dominant terpenes were always the same, um, which was really interesting. Some of them fluctuated. Sometimes I saw limonene and myrcene as the highest terpenes, like you normally would in a lot of cannabis varieties. So, it just depends on how you cultivate.
Brandon, so I have a question for you. With sending over some seeds to Sour Diesel Tangy, I know a little bit about his setup. It looks like he's got the bucket company uh, like system set up. So, as somebody who's growing from seed, you could grow out the actual seed, like one per pot, and they all have like their taproot or whatever. Or he could grow out a mother and then take a clone of it and fill up, half the room with this mother and half the room with that mother. Um, what do you how would you typically do it as a grower growing from seed yourself? Do you typically run that seed plant with the taproot all the way through, or do you make a mother plant and then take cuts and then grow the cuts?
Okay, so there's actually a lot to this because, as you said earlier, I have a lot of different places where we're doing seeds. So we have a current hunt at Black Label Organics, and we didn't have enough space to put all of the different phenos. So what we ended up doing was we took clones of our plants. We took 5 cuts. We took 5 cuts of everything in the garden that came from seed to begin with, but we also took 5 cuts of the stuff that we weren't able to plant that we had to get rid of. So we cut those plants down, the actual seed, but we kept the genetic stock. So that way, after our first run in the first greenhouse, we can replant all of those clones from those original seeds just so we can run them out, because that was part of the original, like, whatever it was, 500 plant hunt.
I want a few of those.
Yeah, there's
Hey,
all kinds. Dude, there's so much stuff. The Blueberry Romulan MK Ultra from 20 years ago is fucking insane, dude. It smells like okay. So this MK Ultra has this really nasty body odor onion smell to it that's really, really rank. And it also has the Romulan pine to it, right? So that's really cool. And then I have a Purple Kush MK Ultra, that has that, but it also has like a deep pepper, earthy pepper mixed in, and then it also has lemon on the back end, plus the pine.
So body odor, pine. I'm thinking you should call that Sasquatch.
Lumberjack.
Brandon, I have a question. First, I'll say I wanted to add to the testers. It's important to get competent testers too, to really, because like I noticed as I
Maybe important
evolved
to
in
get
my,
both.
as I evolved in my garden, I realized that for a while I wasn't getting the genetic potential out of the genetic material I was working with. So if you don't have your stuff on point, you won't even know what the plant could really do. So if you have a whole bunch of slack growers, you won't know how good it could really be. So you want some competent growers as well. And I also
Send them to
noticed
people
that
like Spartan Grown.
Well,
And
I'm,
Pal.
you know,
seed,
I'm
Yeah.
this is my
grown.
question.
Or Matthew Gate.
from seed to clone, the plant does change a little. I noticed, you know.
This is true.
So, do you even think about that when you know?
Yeah, so
That's
a
why
lot
I
of
asked,
times-
actually.
A
I
lot
think-
of times, what'll happen is we'll do our selection, right? And we'll be like, these are all badass, but there's too obviously, you know, there's going to be too many to pick from. We have to narrow it down, and so we take these and we rerun them as clones.
Right.
Ultimately, if you look, here's my thing. If you run a seed and your stuff and your like soil, your environment, and everything's not dialed in perfectly, you're not going to really be able to see the maximum expression of that plant. So that's one of the things, but that's not what I'm throwing these out to be tested for, really. You know, I don't care what type of system you're running. You know, I'm looking really the biggest thing is just intersex characteristics, because you don't want to give somebody shit that's going to hurt them, right?
Exactly.
I've already tested the stuff that I've released, and I even have like really small limited quantities of some stuff that hasn't been released that's still being tested. And then I have new stuff, and it's like I have to get through some of this other stuff before, you know, just to check on it, you know, and because I know the genetics are strong, you know, but I want to make sure nothing shitty comes out of it, you know, because, you know, for instance, blueberry.
Nature finds a way.
Talking about this reminds me of how people sort of test like the resilience of like a firearm or something. Like people have seen like you put an AK-47 or the AK family into like a puddle and like into like the end of a lake bed and like, you know, like, and does it still fire? It's like sometimes you want people who, but it depends on the context, right? In some cases, it might make sense to just give it to a bunch of people no matter what and see if it's like still really great, if it like kind of survives mishandling, you could say. But also it is a different context when you're going with somebody who is growing in a certain cultivation perspective, who might be able to get away with certain things or be looking for certain attributes or traits. So I think that's definitely relevant.
Angie, I had an interesting example for you, asking about like if something did go wrong, like how do you go about it? Like, do you just post it on Instagram and like quote put them on blast, or do you DM them privately? I think it's perfectly fine to post it on Instagram because it'll help the other testers know. And if that breeder doesn't reach out to everybody and say like, hey, there was a herm, then it is your right, you know, as a fucking grower, you should post whatever you're growing. And if that happens to happen, it's something that you should report.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it works, right?
So
You
one
know
thing I
what's
wanted to
really
say,
interesting is when I was testing the TK NO5 haze lime, I had one person say, "Hey, I had a herm in one of them," and he's like, "I'm just gonna pull it off and keep running because the shit's fire." I was all cool. Well, make sure you check, you know, and I give him advice too, you know, because if something like that happens, it might not necessarily be a genetic problem. It could be like, oh, you might have a light leak that you're not aware of. You know, you might have a hole in your tent where something's going on, you know.
well,
so,
even worse, like I have an example of a guy who's
a
been
controller
growing
with a light.
like
If you do
A timer off, yeah.
If you
Not
do
even a
make a
timer.
criticism and you do make a public post, you should definitely it should definitely be detailed. It's the worst criticism is like, it was bad, I didn't
here's-
like it.
Here's an issue I had because one of my testers who posted some fire recently with some of their phenos that they had at the Velvet Punch. Looked amazing. But on there, they do a show. It's my buddy Eagle. He had, for a few days, somebody was looking after his plants, and his setup, he has a bunch of tents. And when it goes to the dark cycle in flower, as you all know, you don't want light leaks. And so for 2 or 3 days in a row, his plant sitter didn't close the tent for flower, and there was open tents with grow lights right next to it that hermed out gear that's out in the market and released that he grows. So like it hermed out some other stuff. And I think that he assumed my gear hermed, but I think that he misidentified a male personally. I posted the image on my story and I asked, what do you think, male or herm? He only sent me one photo and it was under HPS. Like the thought to Tangi is, if this happened to me, if I had a herm, I would pull the plant out and I'd get a full photo of it and a video of it, spin it all the way around, show the male parts and the female parts up really close. And I would show, everything I could as best I could. And in this case, I just got one photo. So it looked like a male to me. It looked just like the actual male I used to make the seeds. So
here's the thing. Bad news is still good news because it's information.
Definitely.
It's data on what you've created, so you can't look at it like, oh, you look at it like, okay, well, hey, obviously, if this is happening and multiple people are having an issue with your gear when you're having your testers run the stuff, or if you're having issues, then obviously don't fucking release it. But it's one
not
of the
getting
reasons-
released for a different reason. But what I wanted to say was, I genuinely do think it's a male, and I'm not saying that because like this isn't even my project. I'm not even really considering myself the breeder. I just F2'd something from a guy that I think does really good work. Vegan Doja DNA on Instagram. He's been breeding for a decade in Humboldt, or not Humboldt, northern, even farther north of Humboldt in Del Norte, California, and he did
he gave
amazing
me a
work in
bunch
my
of stuff,
opinion.
too.
But,
I would definitely.
Jack,
Oh.
I actually have a short video of, like you were explaining, of I had gotten seeds from somebody and the thing hermed out on me. And I took a short video to show that it showed female and then ended up being a male. If you want to see it, I could screen share it.
You can, definitely do that in a second. I just want to
Well-
answer Sour Diesel Tangi. He has his hand up and he has for a few minutes, and I just wanted to give him a chance to
Yeah,
jump in here.
let's let him talk.
All right. So just one thing. I've done testing for a few, actually 1, 2, 3. Brandon will be my my fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, Brandon will be my fourth tester. Quote, quote. I've dropped a few lights. I've dropped a few humidifiers on gear because things went well to the public. I haven't dropped a single light. I haven't dropped a single humidifier, but some stuff went away. Things happen. And I think it's the tester's responsibility to the breeder to communicate that in private and say, hey, dude, I know this is a tester, but I ain't going to drag you through the mud. This is what happened. It happened on plant 1, 2, or 3, or 4, 5, or 6. This was this one. I grew it from seed. The conditions was A. The pH was this. And I think if you're going to be a responsible tester, you need to kind of keep, all your fingers, pointed in the right direction. When you point your finger, there's 3 of them pointing back at you. You better make sure your gear and your stuff is doing what you expect, because it's on you. He was nice enough to give you the gear. You kind of need to take that responsibility real serious and provide them with the data. If you have something and it don't pop, you got to tell them. You have stuff that does pop and then it starts to get intersex traits, you got to tell them. But you don't have to go blasting it out on IG. Occasionally accidents happen, you overcull and things go away. And somebody notices and brings it up that you got 11 out of 12. What happened to that other one? It's like, I'll talk to you in the DM, because you want to make sure that you're not dragging this guy down through the mud. He's testing so he can be better, not he's testing to be criticized. I just want to make sure anyone who's doing that wants to, if you're going to be a tester, you got to kind of take that risk yourself, and you got to really work for that guy. He's trusting you to be honest. He's trusting you to be professional.
I think too, if somebody is going to say, hey, you want to try to run these, I usually have an open line of communication with the people that are are trying things out, if they have questions or anything, I'm there, because a lot of these, I have people that are testers that have only had a couple of runs, but they're successful and they're doing well because there's an open line of communication between them.
You
it's
know,
like
that's
it's
why they're
dangerous
called
because
White hat,
testers.
white hat
you're
hacking
almost
is a lot like that.
you're
You tell the
almost
company, "Oh, hey, you have a vulnerability. Please fix this. This is a legitimate thing. Here's the the error data and all that stuff." But if they and then of course sometimes that doesn't get addressed. But
I
I
mean, but you're
definitely agree.
handing
You gotta have that interaction. I totally
Go ahead,
agree.
Aaron.
you're handing that person a loaded gun and it's aimed right at your head. You got to remember that. So when you're handing
Exactly.
somebody your gear, like, hey, proper etiquette is important. Saturday is dead on, dude. I said to the chat, I'll say it in the panel, you know, having a good level of communication and doing it properly. If something goes wrong, you talk to that breeder directly before you hit the streets, and everything will be okay.
I think I
That's
found
why
out
they're
about it
called
on his show
testers.
live.
That's
Yep.
what testers, when you get tester seeds, that's what your risk is. That's why people give them away for free. So if you get herms, that's not you could blast the guy, but if they were testers, that's what they're testing for. That's your purpose, to see if
I
they
don't
herm
feel like there's
out.
really any blast, really, because if you look at the genetic lineage of the Velvet Punch, there's OGs in there, and there's Chem, and there's Mexican Sativa, all of which have a propensity to be intersex. So I'm not like
Mhm.
scared to admit that. It'd be something that if I was going to release them, I would write that in the notes and warn people. But these aren't being released for another reason. So I want to put a bow on this little story and say I love Eagle as a person and as a tester. He's a great tester. So I'm glad that this came out and that I know there is, if there is light leaks, if you do forget to close your tent, if there is this issue,
Yeah.
that'd be something that I would warn people about. If
So
you hear the
one of the
noise in the
things,
background, it's Arso.
that as a new grower or home grower, that people should be aware of is the sensors, light sensors on any type of equipment. These things can cause these things to happen. I've seen plants that I've run can be completely stable, but there's a crack in the door, or there's something happens where there's a light sensor is off on this side of the room. I've seen plants herm because of those simple issues.
Brandon, have you ever had any, or Spartan, you might be able to answer this also, any like equipment in some of the larger scale commercial grows that puts off some sort of infrared signal
Yes.
that interacts with plants and like herms them out, and you're like, there's no fucking light in here, yet it's like you can't see it, but there is.
So
Interesting.
a lot of commercial the sensors, right, that have LED display boards on there, those need to be blacked out.
Yep.
Because they're usually running and it has a display on there with temperatures, maybe humidity, your ECPH if you're doing
Little
hydro
LCD
stuff.
screen that'll fuck your whole life up, man.
Even if it's on it, so you got to look at like your LED screens on your ACs, on your like splits, mini splits. You got to look at your light controllers like dimmers. You got to look at your environmental controllers. You got to look at all of these like stupid sensors and little light LED displays, all that stuff. They can't be, dude, and especially on a commercial setting, like that's crazy. You know how much like you could potentially lose because
We understand so much more about plant physiology now. I love that you brought that up, Brandon. It's like the same with the microbiome, like all those details, some of which are sort of minute and seemingly not that important in the grand scheme, and other things are seemingly minute and super, super important, or they
There's a
all
new
kind of work in combination.
Yep.
It's
one of the
great
guys
that
who
we can put that into practice.
one of the guys that worked with NASA, I think his name's Bruce Bugby. He's the guy with Apogee Instruments. He made a new sensor called like the PAR-FAR, but they also have one that is like for detecting ultra low levels of light, even if there's like for like light leaks and things of that sort, because he believes that cannabis is one of the most photosensitive plants, even more so than like poinsettias, which are extremely sensitive to that scotoperiod or photoperiod, however you want to look at it. So I think that it's interesting. I have seen people grow in like tents with light leaks and not have herms for years and years, and I think a lot of genetics are like stable enough for that to not bother them. But I do think that if you can darken it out 100% is better than not. So that definitely helps. And I wanted to say in my like bios and everything, and some people call me a breeder or some people call me a pollen chucker. I call myself an aspiring breeder. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, a guy who's done it for a decade. His gear was of the stuff that I've grown my favorite. And well, I said I'm not going to release him. It wasn't because the herm issue. It was actually because I had a pollen contamination issue. And I had another male that I kept around, which I shouldn't have. I was trying to do a few different male work at the same time, which I realized in as small of a place as I have, it's just not feasible. So I got pollen contamination, and most of the seeds are Velvet Punch F2s, but there are some Lamb's People male that I kept around for the reason it was drought resistant and it had super tight node spacing. Spartan Grown actually has one that I think is one of those contaminated seeds because it like didn't grow. It just like stayed super, super squat and tiny. So he's got his hand up over there. So I'm going to pass it over to Spartan Grown and let him jump in.
Yeah, I've been wanting to jump in on this conversation we've been having about testers, and it really just, maybe I'm old school, I don't know, but it's just, to me, it seems obvious. It's like I'm one of those guys that if I can meet you in person and shake your hand, I'd rather do that than anything else. So when it comes to a situation where I'm testing for somebody, I go to that fucking person. And every breeder is going to be different. Every person has a different personality, and they're going to feel one way about something or another way, but they're going to feel fucking appreciative that you went to them first before you went out to the world. So I think that's like a no-brainer question, no matter what happens. That's why, I mean, I send you at least probably one a week, but I don't have that on my IG. You know, I'm not putting it out there, and they look great. It's not that they don't look good. It's just that I feel like in this day and age, most people won't even read your caption. They're only going to look at the video. So when I have testing genetics, unless it's like, I mean, that I know that there's like, that if I look at it and I think it's absolutely flawless, that there's nothing that anybody could pick out of it, I'll throw that up. You know what I mean? But, or after, I always think it's my second run is always my best run. That's going to give me my idea of what this plant's going to be. The first is just especially a tester. You know what I mean? It's just unfair for that plant or that genetic to be judged by its very first run with unknowns. If I get a clue after that first run of how she kind of grows, I can make tweaks to bring out, you know, her best expression, in my opinion. So I just think as a grower, and, you know, that I think to understand the plant, we have these parallels. Plants and people there's so many parallels where plants and people are the same. So I just treat them the same. So, you know what I mean? If I have issues, I respect the plant just like I respect the person. All this other stuff is just bullshit to me. I don't understand why it's difficult for people.
I respect intersex people, but I don't respect intersex plants. I'll kill them. I'll kill them the second I fucking see them. You're dead. I'll chop you out.
You're about to get some hate mail for that, I'm sure of it.
You got to think about it, Jack. If it wasn't for intersex plants, this plant wouldn't be here right now. So I'm okay with it.
Hey, ChemDog,
I have to
Gorilla
agree with
Glue.
that.
Yeah, I'm with that.
So
I'm
many amazing. OG Kush.
I'm definitely a native plant liker, and think that keeping those feral and even wild populations is really important. And I hope that, since a lot of it is in the People's Republic of China, for example, I hope that I hope that some efforts can be made on that part.
I think it'll be a little while. I hate to say it. I'm not holding my breath.
You're right. I definitely agree with you.
You never know, though. I think things changed here pretty quick. They thought it was going to happen in like the 60s and 70s, and then it was like, there's no way it's going to happen. And when I was younger, I thought in my lifetime there'd never be legalization. And now it's like right on the doorstep.
If there's enough, this is like getting out of my wheelhouse a bit. I'm not a political scientist, but I do feel like if there's enough outside exterior political pressure, you know, things happen. I mean, there's certainly other intoxicants. The PRC is willing to let people, the CCP is willing to let people partake in. So I don't know.
I think if the money is there and enough people publicly get behind it, like you said, it might change. But it's interesting because they do have such a long, rich history there. It's just kind of sad to see how things have changed politically, and there's sort of no access at all. And it's like a really high penalty, if I'm not mistaken. There's like steep crime.
Yeah, it's treated really bad. I've heard stories about people. I think I've already told this story, but if you like getting this is like an odd example. If you were like get into a bar fight, or like you were to somehow go to a hospital or like do some sort of criminal activity, and they think that drugs are involved or there's something going on, and they take your blood test and or like some medical thing happens, and if they find like cannabis material on your like in your body physiologically, even if it was like from like way before you're even in country, it's still a brig, and things can get problematic. But I've heard of other people just simply getting a slap on the wrist and paying money. So, both things happen surely. It probably matters who you know.
It's just like here in the U.S. I gotta say, like, if you're really rich, you just get slapped on the wrist for anything. You pay a fine, you get out of jail. You're not going to jail. You're just gonna pay. Like these big banks that launder money for cartels and shit, they paid like $100 million fine, but none of them see any prison time. People like do a little bit of drug transaction on the street, and they do life in prison. So it's a different standard depending on what level of income you're at. Unfortunately, we've seen that represented well in the United States and in other countries. So nobody's really perfect, but we're all working to be better, I think. And I'm actually kind of surprised to see how things. I guess I shouldn't say too surprised. There's like reactions in politics, and I think that I never thought before the MORE Act might even go through, because I think before there was a Republican control in the Senate, and they're not really pro cannabis typically. Not to make this a political thing, but now that it's all blue, the president, the House, and the Senate, I think that there might be cannabis reform, even though Biden during their campaign didn't really get behind it. They were like, let's do more research kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes moving forward.
I just saw something. Oh no, never mind.
It's all good.
Something different.
So I want to answer. Can I answer a question in chat really quick, because it's like kind of difficult to.
Absolutely.
I don't want to. It'd be too much typing. So the question basically was, they have a tent and they have a intake outtake, but it's still getting too hot, so they need to open the little side vents that have the mesh screen. They're struggling with that because they're in the flower cycle and they don't want to have light leaks. So the only solution, besides obviously getting a second fan or a bigger fan, that I can think of, just my way of just making things work until I can fix it, would be to go ahead and open your vents, or at least one vent, and then get a box or box-like structure that's bigger than the hole to cover it. And then on one side, you can cut out a hole that's the size of a ducting, and then just put a ducting and bend that ducting so that it's like at a 90 back towards the box. That way air flow can still come in, but light can't go around corners. Just something like that, or that concept that would be, with materials you probably have laying around the house right now, you can mock something up just to get you through.
If they're not already running their lights at nighttime, is a good way to manage temperature. I know a lot of people do that. It's like a pretty basic thing. But if you're not doing that, or if like some of your cycle is during the day and some of it's at night, try and make most of it during the night so the temperature is a little bit easier to manage.
Was the issue just that the room was too warm and we were trying to figure out a light?
Tent's too warm and they want to open up the vents, but they're worried about light leaking in. I would actually say even from the bottom, it's less likely.
They weren't specific. They just said that they wanted to open the vent. They didn't say if it was a humidity or a heat thing.
But they need like a light decorative solution.
Yeah.
Most tents kind of have like a built-in like level, like you can pop it out and then there's like a mesh. But like if you do it the way that the Velcro is, like you can kind of make like a kink so no light can go through it, but air, it like creates a little bit of a buffer layer. You know what I mean? So it's not really closed.
I have a really lazy way to solve this, and some people might like it if you have time throughout the day to do this, but a little fan and a bucket of ice with a hole on either side of it goes a long way. Literally, I used to I had a bucket and I would just fill it with ice, because those HPSs get like 150 degrees anywhere at little 410. It's smoking hot. I know that problem. And literally, I put like a 4-inch hole on either side of a bucket, filled it with ice to that point, and then just put a fan. So it was blowing, a little computer fan that was blowing right through that hole, cooled off my room like 5 or 10 degrees, depending on how how wet the air was.
I've seen people use like foam coolers for that, so the ice sticks around a little bit longer, and you can like cut out the fan size hole, and then you can use like a little PVC exit pipe type thing. Household Hacker has like a DIY. It's like $20 air conditioner. Sorry, Diesel Tangy, I see you got your hand up again over there, which is nice because since you don't have a video, I can't like see you trying to jump in. So I appreciate that. So sorry, Diesel Tangy, what's up?
No worries, man. What I was doing when I had tents was I would run the 6-inch, the corrugated hose, basically. I'd run two, one for intake, and pushing cooler air and my exhaust would come out of the top. I do a loop with that hose up on top of the tent because you got that kind of that dead space up on top of the tent. So I would make bends in it, just like Spartan said. Light doesn't like to go around corners, and then because usually get like 20 feet of that. And I did it with my my 4.4. I used 4-inch, and for my 5.5, I used 6-inch, and I could get air movement in there. Granted, it cost me a little bit of fans, but I didn't have to worry about those side panels because I was actually forcing it the same amount of air in as I did out. So I had kind of a balance. My tint didn't go too, didn't turn into, didn't suck in, it didn't blow out like a balloon. And with the AC Infinities, you can dial them into the exact same intake and outtake and just flip one around, pull in from the bottom and push out at the top, and they're all the same. It helped me. I'm sure everyone's doing that, but I just thought I'd share it.
The intake equalizing the pressure is really nice for sure.
He said not really too hot, just too much negative pressure with just one fan. So in my opinion, that's about fan balancing, adding or subtracting fans. There's equations for this too, for your whole room and for measuring, the term is escaping me, but there's an actual term for this in
CF.
CFMs. Thank you. Yep.
CFM,
cubic feet per
minute.
Yep. And that's a way that you can actually dial in your room using an equation. Of course, you'll have to you may have to get a thermostat or something where you can scale back your fans.
Yeah, I was just thinking, that's the solution right there. Just he's got too much, but yeah, you can just get add a second fan as big as you have, and then put one of them on the dimmer basically, and then you can actually dial it to exactly how you want it.
My exhaust fan is on a little dial, so I keep it fairly low in veg. I let it get a little bit warmer and more humid, and then in flower I crank it up. But my intake is a constant. The one thing I wanted to mention about the kinking of the vents is if you're using that for primary ventilation, if you're looping them from tent to tent, is you're losing every kink, you're losing power. You're drawing more on that fan. So you're getting less of that. You have a carbon filter, you're getting less of that fan's power. So you're circulating less air than you might think. And with
every 90-degree turn is 10 feet of ventilation. That is the exact calculation.
That's really good fact to have. And I wanted to say there's also something to overcome that, which is the intake fan that I use is actually considered a booster fan, which is meant to be stuck in the ducting. So it's small. It's just to keep the air moving through a longer stretch of duct. So if you have to run it from one tent to another, like if you have a one's in flower and one's in veg, you can dump the heat and humidity from your flower tent into your veg space because it doesn't matter if it's a little bit warmer and more humid over there. And that's a way to share the spaces and regulate the temperature during the night cycle if you don't want that. Spartan sent me a really good video about how heat is a great way to overcome the humidity spike in the night cycle. And I was saying how because I run my lights at nighttime, it naturally gets warmer during the day. Right when my lights go off, it's beginning to be the warmer parts of the day. So the whole environment gets a lot warmer. But he was talking about, he sent a video where this guy was using air conditioners with a heat setting instead of using dehumidifiers, and they're a lot more efficient. And you could probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's exciting to me because it's something new to me, but it's using the principles of VPD to save. It's not going to be more efficient, I don't think, as far as efficiency goes, but it's going to be able to make it so you can dial in your humidity in your room to never have spikes. And how that is they add a heating coil to the HVAC, and so once the room, if obviously the HVAC's running to cool the room off to a certain set point, once it gets to that set point, the condenser in the AC unit shuts off, and it shuts off. This will keep a heating unit in there that's going to supplement heat into the room to keep that condenser on. And why that's important is because it lights out when you get that sudden drop of heat. For example, this heat, in this instance, this heater would be kicked on, so it's going to supplement the heat that you're losing, or you normally would be getting from your lights at that time. In your dehues, if you have dehues in there, or if you just have this AC running, it's still going to dehumidify your room and pull that humidity down at a nicer rate instead of this dramatic swing.
I've heard of a lot of people doing that on a large scale in living soil indoor grows that have that heat supplementation, or they have an intense ventilation system when the lights go out to pull that humidity spike.
Yeah.
What he was saying made a lot of sense to me, even though I'm not an HVAC guy. It made sense that you wouldn't need as many dehumidifiers if you were using that certain. Like I said, I'm not an
He was
HVAC
saying
guy, but
he did it. He said he was able to dehumidify with, I believe it was 10 tons of AC. He was able to dehumidify like 1,000 liters of water just with the AC unit. He set up several commercial grows, he says, with no humidifiers in the, I'm sorry, dehumidifiers, no dehumidifiers in the room at all. In fact, he said it was the second one that he did was the driest grow room in the whole entire facility, and he had to come up with ways to add humidity back because it was keeping it so dry.
it's interesting.
Where can we find more information on this?
I can
It's an unlisted video. I felt like I fucking commented and I deleted my comment because I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be seeing this or if this is like secret tech Spartan sharing with me over here.
give me a minute. I'm gonna see if I get the link. I'll drop it in chat, and then I'll also drop it in our personal chat so you have it.
Because I went on their channel and it wasn't on their channel listed, and then I looked at the little thing and there was like a lock and then like a bar, and it's like an unlisted video just like for the homies, so you got the link. So I don't know how you got it, Spartan, but I appreciate that you shared it with me, and it was very informative and a good topic of conversation for this evening, because I think more people are moving into larger scale, even if they're doing it at home. Like a mini split could act, if I don't know if you can get that sort of thing set on there, but it's something to think about versus investing, because some of the dehumidifiers, especially the good, like the Andin and the what's the other one? I can't think of the name right now. Everybody uses them. Quest. They're pretty expensive, I think, relatively.
The humidifiers, yeah, those are
Dehumidifiers or ACs?
Dehumidifiers, but they also produce
sense.
heat. And like he was saying, like primarily what you want is to cool the grow room, and you're fighting the lights and in indoor setting most of the time. And if you can use that thing that you already have, everybody is going to build AC in naturally for the most part, unless you like live in the North Pole. You're for the most part going to be using AC to cool off your indoor grow room. And so you've got the ACs already. So what he's saying is, knowing that when you go into the build, you just add this heat setting, so then you don't have to buy tons of dehumidifiers, which I was like, damn, that's a huge. And he's like, once you get down the road, if you want to buy dehumidifiers, but when you're getting set up, it's like totally not necessary. And I thought that was.
You have to remember, if you're going to use your air conditioner in that capacity, that you have to get a mini split that also has a heating core on it.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. But it's more expensive for the AC. You're going to pay a little bit more up front.
But you can buy those heating cores after the fact too, and get them put into. You just have to you have to know, get your HVAC guy, or if you know HVAC, you just match the serial number or the model number, of your HVAC with the heating core unit. And there's usually, he explains in this video, but there's usually two models, and you can go with a smaller one. There's I think it was a 15 amp and a 20 amp or something. I'm sharing it now in our both chats. I'll do in YouTube, and then I'll do in our own chat too.
Yeah, they made special split ductless systems for like computer rooms that have humidity control as well. It's just a lot more expensive, for the initial buy.
Yeah.
Or even for like curing buds, like Curador makes those larger commercial scale systems that they control the humidity, heat, and everything. So it's interesting what's out there. And then when you can look deeper into it, and sometimes there's other companies that are doing it without cannabis labels on them, and it's cheaper to go that way. That's why like these just straight up whatever AC you would be using with the heat coil, it's not like you're paying the cannabis tax. So
I feel like any company that's targeted cannabis as their target audience or their target market has a massive massive increase on cost, whether it's an electrical company or whether it's a nutrient company, because it's been my experience that a lot of even the fertigation salts, all of the agronomic inputs, whether they're organic or synthetic, are way, way, way less expensive than you could even possibly imagine to produce a lot of like the hydroponic, or like especially the synthetics are crazy inexpensive, and you could literally build your own nutrients if you knew how, by just adding these like nutrient mineral salts together, and it's so inexpensive. And that's why like it works for so well for conventional agriculture, is because they're able to decrease their cost. But again, that's damaging, so I don't
Like here
advise it.
in San Diego, I gave that example of the mother of all blooms, the MOAB, which was just double to up to like sometimes 10 times the price of I think it was like potassium sulfate or something. It was
Yeah,
just like
potassium
this.
sulfate. It's like
So
0053.
yeah, so I think it was like 0.5225 or some shit. I don't remember. But what the point of the matter is, there you could also here in San Diego. I think that's a San Diego company, but you could also go to like there's a place called Cangrettos or something like that. It's a local like farm store, and
Gingrittos.
yeah, they can make your own fertilizer specific formula, whatever you want, and they give it to you like at pretty good rate. That's what I think one of the facilities that Matthew used to work with, they might have used that.
Yeah, Outco. They were using a company
Yeah,
that did that.
that's true.
Yeah, so it's an option, and I think it's more affordable if you don't go in and saying like, "Hey, we're growing dank over here. We're fucking growing pot.
Still,
we got all
it's
this money. Fucking,
super,
we're happy to pay
bad,
more."
especially because of that phosphate runoff. If they are not like reclaiming that water and trying to figure out how to bioremediate, phosphate runoff for hydroponics is so fucking terrible. It is so fucking bad for the environment.
I have a question that I never got to earlier. It says, how long does the Limeorilla crossed with Lime 1 backcross take to finish, roughly? That's from Vero_HTX. So hopefully they're still with us.
Yeah, so all of the stuff that I breed typically runs between 8 to 10 weeks, depending on how you like your weeds. Some people like to pull it when it's still a little bit clear, when it's just turning cloudy. Some people like the trichome a little more cloudy. Some people like them amber. Some people like them fully amber. So it's just a personal preference, but I tend to see more weight put on all of these varieties if you take them full term.
Full 10 weeks, 70 days.
9 to 10 is usually optimum.
I like almost all my stuff like 63 to like 77 days. I like some of the kind of longer stuff sometimes, but letting it finish, letting those hairs go orange or amber, letting the trikes get a little bit of that ambering in them, I tend to find best yield and best effect for most of my stuff. Unless I really want something to be heady, I'll harvest it a little bit earlier. Like if I'm like, oh, I want this to be my pick-me-up shit, But for the most part, I like to kind of let it ride. And actually, Sour Diesel Tangy, I want to throw it back to you because you got criticized. I saw it once in a post. You're like, I'm harvesting this, and it was something that you'd grown before, and then you grew the clone, and you're like, I don't want it when it's ripe. I don't want it more amber. If I'm remembering correctly, I could be wrong. I'm like 99% sure. And then you're like, no, I've grown this out. It's too sedating if I let it run a little too long, so I'm going to take it at this time, and this is when I like it. So, am I remembering that correctly? And what strain was that with?
Yeah, that's one of my fondest memories. That's my that's my big my man crush on Spartan. Spartan jumped right in there and defended my honor there. It was awesome. He's like, hey, that's the way the kid likes it. And that's the way he's going to smoke it. It's his garden. He'll do what he wants. It's one of my fondest memories of the podcast, but it was awesome. But yeah, it's true, man. I cut my stuff pretty early. I grow it for myself. If people don't like it, it's like, that's fine. Don't like it. But
they don't have to smoke any.
Yeah, I mean, it's plenty
taker.
true. It's plenty true with tons of other plants, right? You might want the fruit more immature, or you
I
might
like
want
my
to let it
bananas
ripen up.
ripe
Yeah,
as fuck, like almost black. And some people are like, that's disgusting. They're like about to go rotten. I can't believe you're eating that. But I'm like, hey, it's the sweetest. And sometimes people say it's the most nutritious. So
I think that Spartan is absolutely correct in saying that. So everybody has a different preference, and that's the most beautiful thing about cannabis and all the different varieties. They have so many different ranges of effect. I don't like things that are really heavily sedating because I have too much stuff to do.
that's a good point. I want to get to a question from the chat. Husky, with IE at the end, asks, question for the panel, freeze drying your buds. Thoughts on this? I've never personally tried it. I've only heard bad results as far as like it powders up. It stays like looking like the same size and shape of like the bud if you harvest it and like freeze dry it. And if you're doing it for hash reasons, I guess that might work out. But, or any concentrate, I guess. Like powdering it up to get more of a yield on the concentrate might help. But from what I've heard, it doesn't result in great smoke because there's usually chlorophyll taste still in there. And so I'm curious if anybody else on the panel has any thoughts or if you've actually tried a freeze-dried bud at any point.
You know what? I can say something on that. I've never done it personally, but my idea is kind of like I would never take a flower that I've worked so hard and like that is like my idea of like perfection. Oh, this is the perfect medicine, and then not do it the way that it's been conventionally done for the whole time I've been cultivating. I think that it would have a lot of benefits for certain things. Medicinal flower, not one of them. I think probably for hydrocarbon extraction, it's probably absolutely wonderful where they can literally just go in there, freeze dry it, pack it up. They can cut down their production time. And time is money, right? So
Well, the terpenes are going to be saved in there too with the flash freezing. So if they're able to, use like a BHO and separate them out with a system where you got like a rotovap, you're catching the terpenes first, and then you're getting all the cannabinoids second. It's definitely an efficient way. Spartan, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to say you're not going to get any any curing. You're not going to get any of those, later down the chains as these things decay or whatever you want to call it. You're not going to get any of that. So it's going to be, I would imagine it's going to be really ripe. That's what happens with the flower for sure.
what happens to chlorophyll?
I had a buddy in San Francisco that was growing for like a dispensary in Prop 215 and stuff, and they freeze dried a flower back in like 2016 or 17, and he showed it to me last year. And it was in a jar, and he opened it. He's like, check this out. Tell me what you think. And I was like, oh yeah, it looks like pretty decent weed. It was like really frosty. And when he's like, pick it up. I picked it up. It had like almost no weight. It was like weightless, and it was like nothing. And when you crushed up a little bit, it wasn't good to smoke either. You crushed up a little bit of it, and it was like the driest thing you have ever. It turned to powder when
like
you
everything from the dispensaries.
looked at it, dude. Yeah.
For the most part.
But that said, it looked so perfect. It looked like it was still growing.
That's the thing. It's like freezing it in time almost. It's like a time capsule of like what that bud would look like and maybe smell like. I don't know. But like everybody said, the experience doesn't seem to be that great. I had a question from LG420 said, I'll be flipping mine in about a week. Ever try 11/13? For those who don't know, they're talking about 11 hours of light on, 13 hours of light off. I want to say DJ Short is where I probably heard that first being highlighted. He said it's kind of like Hawaii or like island style, and he got more pheno expression. I started trying that, and ever since I stopped doing 12/12 because I do like a 17/7 in veg to save myself an hour for a little bit of less electricity, and the plants still do just fine.
I do 16/8. Always, I have for about 6-7 years now.
Yeah, it works just fine, and the plants seem to be really happy. And if you're running high intensity lighting, they get their DLI in that cycle, no problem if you have the proper hanging heights and everything.
Exactly.
So with the 11/13, I have noticed what I would imagine is more pheno expression, like more colors coming out of almost all the strains that I've been running. And I really like the 11/13. I don't think it's necessarily like mandatory. 12/12 works perfectly. I actually have a far red initiator, so I could run 13/11, like 13 hours on, 11 off, because when you put them to sleep, you can get like an extra hour of light and they'll still be in flower just fine. I've seen people doing that and they get higher yields and things like that, but I'm more in it for the highest quality, like head stash. I'd like to get a great yield and good return, but as long as I'm hitting around a gram a watt or a little bit more, I'm really happy. And being homegrown and clean, I'm just happy to make it to harvest with no mold, pests, anything like that, and
Dude,
provide
I've seen
myself and my wife medicine.
that's awesome. I've seen strains flip at like with, it could be 15 hours of light.
14, yeah.
Yeah, and they start flowering. They're like, I don't give a fuck what you think the light should be for me. I got slurricane. That shit flips like, if you like turn off the light for 20 minutes, it's like, yeah, I'm going. I'm dead.
They call some stuff fast in the old like European seed banks. They would call that like a fast. It's not quite an auto, but it's like a fast, and so it finishes for like if you're in Michigan or somewhere where it has a kind of harsh ending of your season. If you're not in a greenhouse, if you're looking for outdoor, you want something that's going to trigger a little bit sooner. And a lot of the guys in Michigan have been talking about, what day of the year some of their stuff is flipping, and a lot of the stuff is different. It's not all the same exact date.
But
And I guess this year it happened. Everybody was saying their stuff was flipping sooner. I guess there was good sun over there, and they had probably a strong veg, so they're more mature and ready to flower. But that's just my hypothesis.
some stuff will flip sooner, like super silver haze, and it'll take longer to finish. I have a super silver haze that flips with slurricane, but takes 13 weeks to finish. Slurricane's done in 7 weeks.
Yeah,
Everyone
I have a ton of super silver haze stuff right now, and they have some of the biggest fucking frames I have seen on plants. They are insane, dude.
Monsters,
And
dude.
I can't grow them in my tent. They grow too big. My first plant was Blue Dream, and it's a blueberry crossed to super silver haze, and they literally just like stretch to like 4 or 5 times their size in veg, and they get so out of control with side branching. They're just amazingly large plants.
I have a lot of blueberry crosses that are crossed into super silver haze right now too, and Johnny
Trying to
Blaze
bring that
is one of them.
structure down, or
No, we're just running the phenos. We're going to see how they are. I mean, we're running a bunch of 20. I would say that, out of the, I think, 440 plants that we have in our greenhouse, I think 270 of them were from the pheno hunt out of like 500. No, we had 500 that we tested, and I think there's like 350 total. So there's still like 120 plants that I talked about earlier that we cut that are going to get hunted through the next round. But we started with a lot of my homeboy's seed stock that he gave me that are from, between 1999 and 2003. The MK Ultra crosses, the Super Silver Haze crosses, and those blueberry crosses. So, I'm seeing some cool stuff. I see some stuff that would probably make that's old that you wouldn't typically want for commercial production for flour, but that would be excellent for hash making, right? Because of the surface area of the, they're super frosty, but they might not be dense. But since they're so covered in trichomes.
Somebody once said, like, with those structures, if you dipped your fist in a ball, like in sugar, and it was dripping wet, you're going to collect less sugar than if you stick your fingers out, stick it in a bucket of water, and then dunk it in sugar. You're going to get that sugar all around the outside of the surface area of your finger. So for a hash maker, those kind of foxtaily, open, loose calyx buds, like you said, that aren't the most appealing flower, can wash really well. And Blue Dream and Super Silver Haze are like that in my experience.
The human brain evolved in the same way. We have all these crinkles and shit in our brain to store more area because surface area is what it's all about.
Yeah,
those wrinkles are what advanced our brain a lot, for sure.
We're really taking kind of a different approach to the pheno hunt because we have all of these processors that are, absolutely badass at what they do. And so we're looking at the varieties and saying, hey, this might be great for flour, but it might not be good for washing. But,
Do you do any washing of your own, Brandon?
I don't really do too much extraction stuff or concentrates, really. I have a lot in the past. That's actually what I did my last prison term for. But I just don't, I don't have time. My main focus is on pushing soil research and the
good. Keep at it so you can bring us nuggets of knowledge.
forward.
Yeah, keep at it.
Let the extract artist do the extract artistry. You know, you don't have to dive into it. You've got people around you that are really good at it. You've got your time dedicated in your farms and your research. So I think you're definitely on the right path. Spartan often
Can-
says, I'll let the other people do that. You know, I'm going to do what I do best and focus on
Yeah.
that. And then I'll let the other people do it. And if you get interested in it someday, then fuck it, go for it then. But it's not necessary. One thing I wanted to say
Jack,
about the long flowering stuff, like the super silver hazes and other ones that take like sometimes 13 to 16 weeks and crazy shit. A lot of people are like, oh, they'll never finish. They'll never finish. One tip or trick I have for those people that are like, it's just shooting out white hairs, and it keeps on throwing more calyxes and bracts, and it just keeps getting bigger and it's not finishing. If you're at 12-12, go to 11-13. If you're at 11-13, try like 10 on, 14 off, and keep dropping it down. Even if you have to go like 9 on and just give it more darkness, that helps plants finish up. If they're like close to the end and you want to finish them up a little bit, just give them less light. And it sort of simulates that fall, less hours of light per day. Even if it's less DLI, I haven't done any like crazy calculations, but I've
you know, I
seen
get
it
a question
finish
all the time.
plants.
That makes a lot of sense.
What about the
actually.
24-hour force finish of darkness? Have you guys heard this? Like, give your
I
plant
do that just to fuck with
a
them.
day of darkness. Just to
I've,
fuck with them.
I heard a thing that said from like, and I don't, it sounds like bullshit, but it said like the STEM, something Institute of Medical Marijuana, maybe like Sweden or something like that. It said that they did an experiment where they tried like 24, 48, and 72 hours, and like 48 or 72 hours of darkness increased the terpenes and cannabinoids the most. And I've seen people actually try it, like Lost Leaf on YouTube in Michigan. He did a little side by side of like darkness before harvest and did some terpene and cannabinoid analysis with it. So there's some, it's more bro science, because if you take a
There's
cut off the
anecdotal
plant,
You have to
evidence.
have
cull is
proper
a little different.
analytics. You have to have proper controls.
A
in
larger
place.
study needs to be done. I would say
Yeah.
that if there is a scientist out there in a place where they can legally conduct a study, like the University of Guelph, who did that great drought stress study, and the clone study, where they looked at cutting the leaf tips versus not cutting the leaf tips and things like that, like how many leaves was the best to leave on a clone.
So I'm about to start a research project. The reason why we just recently took down all the pots out of the middle room at Majestic, and I had everybody consolidate soil all into one, amend it, is because what we're gonna do is we're gonna do I'm gonna be doing an entire round of weekly saturated in tissue tests, because I know how to analyze all that stuff now. I know how to go through all the agronomy work. I know how to adjust all the levels. So I'm going to be able to spend more focus on that aspect, so I can maximize the potential of these plants, and then I can write up SOPs based off of certain cultivars. But when you're able to do that type of science, where everything is going to be consistent across the board, then you can add in new factors, right? Then you can add in the things like where I talk about biological crop steering. You can add in like the trichoderma, the EM1. I already use those, but if I was to do like I'm now, what I'll be doing is I'll be able to physically show, hey, these are the things that are happening. These are the tests to prove it. This is what happens without. It's being able to have a really controlled factor and be able to collect the data, I think, is going to be real key into maximizing all that stuff.
For sure. I want to say one thing I wouldn't want to skip on is any of the IPM, like Bavaria Bassiana. I've heard that needs to be reinoculated as much as like every 4 days. Matthew, what do you, and Brandon, I know that you use it in your system over there. What are your thoughts on how often to reinoculate, and maybe some things that pair well with it for IPM for the listeners out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't I just close this? Right. So anyways, sorry about that. So yeah, so there's some studies that show that Bavaria bassiana and I've talked about it a bunch of times already. It can be an endophyte in plants and probably also cannabis, but I haven't seen anything specific on it, and I keep saying that. And I'd love to be
and it's a type of cordyceps, right?
That's right. It's in the cordyceps family. And so the thing is that it can infect a bunch of different insects, but it can be, but whether or not it actually stays in cannabis at all, or to some extent, really depends. And in other studies, like with corn and those plants, they found evidence where the Beauveria bassiana is still residing in tissues, but at a very, very, very low level, and not necessarily a level that's going to cause a bunch of physiological changes in the plant. Some of those changes might simply be to upregulate certain defense compounds or secondary metabolites that can be beneficial from the plant, because maybe just because it's a fungus, no matter what, even though it's like inside the plant, colonizing it in a non-disease causing manner. But I've also seen research that shows that some insects will just totally avoid plants that have Beauveria bassiana, as if they can detect that either it's there or maybe it's also producing some secondary metabolites that are sort of repellent in that way. I think I saw this with leaf miners specifically, the research that I'm thinking of, but I can't remember the title myself. So if it is an endophyte in cannabis, for example, and even if it's not, if you reapply it multiple times, you'll get more conidia and germinating propagules. And I know Brandon has talked about this before, it's really important to not just have like propagules, you would really want to have spores or conidia preferentially. Isn't that right, Brandon?
Yeah. So what happens is the spore actually attaches to the insect and it produces, I think it's chitinase, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm sure that is something like chitinase that dissolves chitin or a similar compound. And usually it's a cocktail of things like with powdery mildew for plants.
Yeah.
I've heard with any biological, they say you want spores on contact, or like
Yeah, that's what I like to say.
It's true. and so when we talk about the the efficacy of using these biocontrols, because it usually takes a massive amount when you're using them as a biological inoculation into soil. So you have to have the CFU or colony forming units be extremely high to be effective. And to make these things even more effective is you can add other products with them that work synergistically. For instance, Pyganic, right? Pyganic is a natural, listed for organic use. It is a pyrethrin product that is an extract from chrysanthemum flower. It has a half-life of about 11 and a half hours, but what it does, it's an insect, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I believe it's an insect
it's a paralytic.
Yeah.
Did that get banned in California though? I feel like that has some. Maybe it's pyrethroids that got banned, but
there are synthetics.
So
there's a difference.
Synthetics, yeah,
that are very, very toxic and they're not good for the environment.
Permethrin's one of them.
Yes.
For example.
So these are naturally derived compounds similar to like azadirachtin, for instance, which is another one that can be used with Beauveria bassiana. They can also be used with nematodes. All three of these products could be used, like you could do pyrethrin or the Pyganic and the Beauveria bassiana together, and you get dual modes of action where you're immobilizing the target pest, and then it increases the efficacy of the fungus because it's able to better attach to it, and it just functions well because the thing's already fucked up, right? So if you go in there and you're affecting them with one thing and these things are like, oh, I'm already messed up, and then reinforcements come in and they just knock them out, and it's like, you got the whole team. And then if you do it like where you have a third, something like another biocontrol like Stymernema, which is a nematode, you're coming at it from multiple angles. So there's a multiple range of different biocontrols that interact with each other that are antagonistic that you don't want to use. For instance, high levels of, Pyganic, the pyrethrin, is not good for earthworms. It might not necessarily kill them, but it'll fuck them up, So it might not necessarily be something that you want to, like, you have to know how much you can use to be effective without inducing damage on a system.
I think multiple modes of action is definitely a great way to go about doing your IPM. I always laugh when Spartan Grow refers to nematodes. I think he calls them ninja toads, and I think just like combining it with other things, I can imagine. I think they're one of the most overlooked IPM. They're not super expensive. I think that they do a pretty good job. Spartan, do you have a name of a type? I know Brandon just dropped one, or maybe where you get them, what kind you like to use, and what they're attacking.
So what I use is worm castings, and worm castings have nematodes in them already for me. But if I'm worried about, like, I have a pest and I wanted to make sure, SF, I can't. I can't.
That's all you really need to know for ordering sake.
Steinernema felschii.
Felschii, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
And yeah, why are you asking me? We got the pest guy right there.
But we want to know. But see that. Hey. But as much as I appreciate that vote of confidence, Spartan, I think it's really incredibly helpful to have people who are actually putting the theory into practice, like as a legitimizing agent. So the things that you use, I think, is really important that people hear from your personal experience.
Okay.
It also happens to agree with mine. So.
Well, and you had I heard you talk about it in the past, and you had good results. So when people have good results with anything IPM and it's not a harmful pesticide, I'm like, all right, jot that down in your memory banks. Like, tell people about this thing. It's awesome. Use it. Recommend it. Especially when this is the cheap home grow. It's not a super expensive one either.
Yeah.
So the one thing I heard that you might get dead ones if you order them from certain places. So try to get them local or faster shipping and things like that.
And
or
be sure
microscope
to
check.
store them properly. And with a lot of biocontrols, you can't really store them, and you shouldn't, and you should use them. It's best when it's fresh, just like with produce. But another nematode that's really good is Heterohabditis bacteriophora.
I don't even try to do that one.
Yeah, Steinernema.
Say
even
it
the
or
name
use
or
it.
the use it.
Hey, Steinernema is so much easier.
Yeah, I agree with that,
Yeah.
and it's also much more commonly used. So, and there's a Steinernema caprocapsi or something like that. But again, like, I feel like the Steinernema felschii. I'm not a nematologist, so maybe
I feel like they have a wider spectrum of hosts that they infect.
I agree with that.
Really good because they're one of the only like real biological hunters that you can put into soil that will seek out prey so efficiently, especially if you use massive numbers, and they're so efficient against root aphids, which are a huge problem.
I've never had efficacy with them against root aphids personally. Only with like fungus gnats, for example. Yeah, a lot of the clients I know that I'm not, but hey, if it's been your experience, I mean, I've heard people say it before, but
if when it comes to a lot of these biologicals too,
you have to take care of them like they're pets.
Aphid typically,
that's true,
will be on like the umbrella or like the root ball typically. So it's really important to do your drenching when you're doing your soil drenching to kind of focus on that area. But when you're doing these kind of soil drenches, you want to drench everything, but not to run off. So
definitely,
if you have to do it a little bit at a time, because maybe your media is a little dry or something, and it's going to take a little bit longer to hydrate that, you really want to kind of, like, in my experience, the biocontrols work better if you don't have a totally dry media.
I was going to say,
I agree with that. With the Bavaria and Isera fumosaurosia, those two.
I think with everyone, when they end up using beneficial bugs, they don't treat them right. So with the nematodes, you have to have that top layer of soil wet for a while so they could get if you let it dry out, they'll die. And then they say nematodes don't work. They release,
and you got to agitate the tank too.
Yes, the way you apply it is vital too. And the same thing with the spider mite predators. If you just let them in there and you keep your place too dry, they'll just die off too. You got to give them a little environment to be happy in. And I think that's why most people who don't have success with beneficials, that's what happens.
A lot of people are reticent to use them either because they cost a lot, which is totally valid, or they have some other sort of reason. And then so they kind of try it haphazard, like sort of halfway, and then it doesn't work very well. And then they go, see, I confirmed my bias. I was right.
Or a one-time use doesn't, a
Yes,
one-time release
exactly.
doesn't necessitate that. Look, you've had a problem for 6 months. Releasing one biocontrol release isn't gonna solve the
So
problem.
true.
There are steps that you take before you even release your biocontrols, right? Like especially if you're in like a vegetative state, right? And you have problems.
Yeah.
You go through your foiler applications, you go through certain regimens while you're treating your media, and then you move forward after the problem has been kind of, the insect pressure has been lowered, and then you release biologicals, especially like you don't want to be doing like foiler applications and crap in flowering, right? So
Oh yeah.
if your only option is biologicals, then you need to have the necessary amount. Like you have to go full pull on those motherfuckers, and you gotta bombard them. Like you have to basically think of it like this: you could be the Romans, and the motherfucking Persians are knocking on your gates, dude. And
You mean
right,
the Greeks?
the Greeks, whatever it is, okay,
The Spartans.
you could. There, you gotta have way more. You gotta be able to outnumber them. So
It's
that way,
true.
when you go to war with this thing, when they go to war, dude, they have enough.
You want the numbers in your favor for
And
sure.
it's the same. And it's the same with the chemical spray. Like people will say, like Suya should have used a chemical spray. And it's like, well, not necessarily. Just like if you spray something, a biopesticide or wettable sulfur or something, and you don't get complete coverage, like you don't say like, oh, it doesn't work. No, nobody says that. But when we use biocontrols, people are very quick to say that. And I
It's
understand that some people make comments about how some biocontrols work when they don't, and there's like, and people are, it's in some ways is a much more simpler thing, a chemical compound versus like a biological organism. There's a greater magnitude of complexity by like 2 or 3 magnitudes, right? But still.
I will say this: I've had them biological controls work extremely well for me with like a manual removal, with like removing the webs with like barbecue skewers, and then after we did that, letting a bunch of the predators, probably more than we needed, in, and they took out. This was at my buddy's grow, his first grow ever. He got cuts from somebody, and they had spider mites on them. And by the time I got over there, they were already in flower. So I was like, well, I can't use any of like the. I didn't want to use any sprays. He didn't want to spray anything on there, and I was like, biologicals will do it. It's like it's a little expensive. And then he thought about the value of the crop, and getting it to harvest with no sprays on there was more important. And now I sort of like laugh in the face of spider mites because I'm like, aha, I know which one. Because the one that we got works really well in our environment here in California. It survives for a certain range. I believe it's the Californicus or maybe another one. But there's a bunch of different ones.
Californicus and Persimilis are often used for spider mites, Tetranychus
And
cerci.
I just want to add that Persimilis is the shit for fucking spider mites.
I love Persimilis for spider mites. Californicus works totally cool too, and it eats pollen, so there's an advantage there that Persimilis doesn't have. But I definitely think Persimilis is the king, or the queen, I should say.
they can be extremely effective.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. And one thing I wanted to jump back to earlier, we were talking a little bit about the dark before harvest. I kind of look at it similarly to flushing. There's like the whole should you flush, not flush. It's like, do you want to pay for 2 weeks more of nutrients or get 2 weeks of just water where you're like basically not paying anything for your nutrients? I feel the same way about the lighting. If you're going to extend the dark cycle, it's like, sure, I could run the light for 2 extra days or 3 extra days, or I could give them a dark cycle for 2 extra days. And like, as long as it doesn't harm the plants. And the one caveat I have is my room has a ton of airflow, and I would check each day to make sure that the RH was never going into an unsafe range. Because if you're not running your lights ever, the plants are going to be kicking off a lot of moisture, if depending on how much water is in the medium. So I don't want people to mold out their crop in the last 48 to 72 hours by putting it into a darkness and not having enough ventilation. So keep your eye on RH and never let it get too high. I'd say above 65, you're getting risky.
So, hey, I can put the whole like, should I flush or should I not flush thing to rest right here, right now. Okay.
I don't think you're going to, but I think I can't wait to hear you
You
try.
could try.
People are going
Okay.
to still debate forever and ever and ever.
Like,
Okay.
subscribe, and share this video for the truth about flushing.
Okay, so there are kind of target ranges that are optimal. Just obviously every variety is different, but there's a target range. And what happens is If your nitrogen level towards the end of flowering is too high, it will give your cannabis a bad taste. It will decrease your cannabinoid and terpene content. It just doesn't taste good, and it's not as good. However, if you decrease things like potassium, calcium, zinc, boron, sulfur towards the end of a period where they're producing all of the metabolites, they're finishing off, and they're also trying to put on the last bit of density and weight, you're going to be subtracting away from that. So, however, if your nutrient levels are way high, skyrocketed above the optimum levels, even if your nitrogen levels are low, it's not really going to make too much difference because there's still going to be too much there's going to be too much nutrient left in that flower. If you're running everything optimal levels throughout and you just decrease your nitrogen towards the end, you should have a good, clean, high potency, high terpene cannabis that produces well.
I'll say that I grow in soil and I'm flushing it the entire fucking time, water only. But some people like to flush with their nutrients, and that's cool. I think that it definitely works more so than if somebody's going to offer me cannabis that's grown with salts or hydro. I've had plenty of really great stuff. I've grown some myself. I grew in cocoa when my Jack Greenstock page was starting, and had some really tasty flower out of it. I personally think flushing does help. I think a whiter ash generally is better. I think a fluffier, lighter ash is actually a little bit better. I don't know if like people can relate to that, but stuff that's like burning hard and like a charcoal, like you could hardly even ash it on a joint, versus stuff like when it's burning, you tap it and like the fucking ash like flies off like a dust. But I know
So
Spartan
wait,
grown.
let me
Sorry,
just
go ahead,
ask Brent, let me recap. Is this what you're saying, Brandon? Is you want to cut out the nitrogen but leave a lot of micronutrients so it keeps the flavor and yet gets some of the nitrogen out? Is that pretty much?
Okay, so nitrogen will make your cannabis excess nitrogen will not only make your cannabis taste bad, but it will actually decrease your cannabinoid and terpene content. That's one of the biggest problems with, but if you cut everything off, like let's say for 2 weeks while these things are finishing, they're not having access to optimum nutrient levels, especially if you're like, let's say in a fertigation salt system, right? Whether it's like hydro or cocoa or whatever, if you cut them off, you're starving those plants. And we're talking about when things are optimal, right?
We got Spartan Grown's got his hand up, and I know he's got to get running here in a second. That's why I was trying to let Spartan maybe give some final thoughts and his final shout outs, and then Brandon, you could finish your thought because we've got like 15, 20 minutes left, but he's got to get going over to Michigan Bros Grow Show. So Spartan.
Yeah. I did want to just say that what Brandon's saying is just mimic what happens in nature, right? So in the soil, towards the end of the season, it gets usually rainy season most of the time towards the end, and we well know that nitrogen falls through the soil when it rains. It gets pushed out, so you have low nitrogen soils in the falls. But when we're providing water, we're really providing a good environment for microbes, which are still providing nutrition to the plant. So nitrogen is one of the easiest ones to flush out of the soil, even organically. So with water. So yeah, you're technically, I guess, kind of flushing, Jack, when you say that, but really, I think you're fertigating all the way to the end. That's kind of the secret in my eyes is to organic growing, why the flavor is still there, because it still has nutrition if it needs it, but it's not.
I'll say some of the stuff I grew has starved its ass off in 3-gallon pots. And organic finishing in a 3-gallon pot is a little bit light, and they do yellow the fuck out and starve. And I actually drought stress them intentionally at the end because I do think it is a like lavender, there's tons of studies that the lavender from drought stress regions produces the best and most terpenes. And cannabis is a C3 plant, just like lavender, that produces linalool and other terpenes. So I like my cannabis to be as tasty as possible. So I think that another thing I want to quote is Dr. Ethan Rousseau's Taming THC paper. He has a site in there that says that lower microbial levels towards the end of flower actually leads to higher terpene levels. So I'm thinking that the drought stress and combination with like the end of the harvest time, and like you're saying, like the rains come and wash out a lot of the stuff and do kill off some of the microbial levels.
Higher nutritional levels in soil when plants are usually present lead to lower microbial populations. So the higher, if there's a lot of nitrogen in the soil, and you're going to get less nitrogen fixing bacteria. They're not required to, there's not going to be a symbiotic relationship going on there.
Aaron's got his hand up, but Spartan, did you want to give your sign out, or are you?
Yeah, I gotta jump out. I gotta leave. Spartan Growing Instagram. Check out my Instagram. I think it's 2 posts back now. I'm giving away a light. Shout out to GML for being gracious enough to allow me to give away a better light than, I think I have one light that might be better than that in my entire garden. So it's a damn good light. It's pretty
HLG
easy.
600R, right? That thing is beautiful and not cheap, but they're worth it.
You just got to follow the panel on the show, GML show on Friday nights. Just follow the people. I already have them in the description. You just got to click on and hit follow, and you're in. Or make a comment.
Good stuff. Good luck to anybody who enters. Thank you so much, Spartan Grown. You can find him at Spartan Grown. He also grows commercially at a facility under Mitten Canico out there in Michigan. They're killing it in the Mitten. They grow some fire. The test results don't lie, and the flowers look beautiful, and they've got an awesome team over there. We're always happy that he's on our team. Each Sunday he shows up, and he's always one of the first people to jump in. So Spartan, thank you so much for joining us again. Always appreciate your time and your thoughts on everything. So next up, I want to pass it over to Aaron, the grower. I see you got your hand up over there.
I've finally been kind enough to just put my hand up. I was like, all right, I got to just stop jumping in on people and just put my hand up. I see everybody else doing it. Let me do it. But my thoughts on flushing are this. I think it comes from a school of thought where we're using salts and we're using synthetic nutrients, and we have a buildup of actual nitrogen and actual potassium and actual sodium built up in the medium. And we need to flush that to get it out. Now, I think we've kind of like equated that to this like fall drenching, but here where I grow in outdoor, I sure as shit hope it doesn't rain at the end of my season. In fact, I hope it doesn't rain until after my plants are harvested. So in that respect, there is no natural flush in this natural environment. So I do think that it's sort of an antiquated thought process with salt growing, but I agree with Brandon. Nitrogen is going to be something that you need to take down toward the end of the cycle. Sustainable Plant has a bunch of research on it. I conducted with them on my plants, showed how nitrogen and calcium fluctuate throughout the plant's life cycle. Those two nutrients are super important. Nitrogen doesn't just leach, it also off gases. So if your soil dries out, I love drought stress, because if your soil dries out, you are off gassing that nitro right into the air. So there's 2 ways to flush. If you think about it, nitrogen, you can off gas or you can push it through, and potassium, you got to push that through. Sodium, you got to generally push that through.
Sodium's not good. You want the lowest possible sodium. The lower you can push sodium, kind of chloride and bicarbonate in soils, kind of the higher you can push the higher you can push your total dissolved salts when they're in balance, because you can push them a little higher for bigger plants as long as you're not creating too much osmotic stress. So like too much sulfur will cause the total, ppm of salts to increase, which can cause more osmotic stress, but doesn't necessarily be toxic to your plant. But
what is sodium's role in plant growth?
It has no role.
It has a role. It has a role. The sodium plays a role in plant biology. It's a small role, but in the same way that like plants can take up like zinc and molybdenum, it's a micronutrient. I mean, you can. There's research on this. And I wouldn't
on plants more than others.
On NA?
Absolutely. Sodium is absolutely essential micronutrient.
As far as I know,
you don't want it in abundancy. Like, 300 parts per million is too much. Like,
You don't even want 25 ppm. I mean,
Right,
that's still
right.
high. I mean,
Well, it's not
so
going to harm your garden though, I think, because you can look at my
it,
numbers. I got higher numbers than that.
I know, and here's the thing, right? So when it comes to osmotic stress, sodium and chloride and bicarbonate all have antagonistic relationships with a lot of other cations, and so they will push them off of surfaces that hold them together.
I gotta
That
jump in.
is the problem.
So I'm just quoting something from Google, but it's phhorticulture.com. They're saying the function of sodium is not an essential element for plants, but can be used in small quantities similar to micronutrients to aid metabolism and synthesis of chlorophyll. So there is some use of it, and I think that one thing that I wanted to reference that made me sort of think of it, there's I think it's Damian Marley or one of the Marley sons of Bob Marley. They have a song, and in the song they have a line that says sativas don't need too much sodium, which I just thought was really interesting because that was never one that I had thought of in like my nutrient regime. It's just something that's sort of there by second nature with a lot of the inputs. Like a lot of the blood meal has like tons of sodium, and that's why I think, Brandon, you like a lot of the vegan inputs. But I want to pass it to Sour D because I see you got your hand up over there.
Real quick, Sardi, hang on just a second. You're not poisoning your soil. You're not poisoning your plants, but you may be reducing
Jack,
cation
you cut out
exchange
there. I think you cut to
capacity.
me. Aaron, can you speak to molybdenum?
Molybdenum.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Talking over. I'm sorry if I'm talking over. You guys are cutting in and out a little bit.
Molybdenum is important for an enzymatic pathway that's used for the conversion of nitrogen.
It also has something to do with anthocyanin production. I know, Steve.
But I actually have to jump off because I have to get out of here.
No worries. It's almost that time. So go ahead and give your where we can find you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep, I'm Brandon Rust. It was always great to chat with everybody. It's my favorite day of the week, Sunday, so I can talk to all the panel members. You can find me on IG, Rust Brandon, and you can find links to most of the stuff that I do and my company, Bokashi Earthworks, there. Appreciate all you guys' coming here every week, and thanks for all the listeners coming, Jack, for hosting, and I'll see you guys next week.
See you next week, Brandon. Thank you so much for coming. Go ahead, Tao.
So KNF has a recipe. They use salt. They use seawater in a certain
very,
ratio,
very extremely diluted amounts.
Yeah, but still, that's definitely going to add some NA, I would believe.
Well, this is controversial. First of all, this is controversial. This isn't like something anybody has exact science on. I believe that sodium, you will see better plants with sodium. Does that make it essential? To me, it does.
I think that what I just looked up said that it could potentially aid, producing chlorophyll.
I disagree with Google on this one. Oops.
The most notable example.
I'm saying it adds to chlorophyll. I'm agreeing with you, actually. I think that sodium's important. I think that it's because it's saying that it's like a micronutrient.
I think it's essential.
So you're saying it's like NPK. You want it in there no matter what, at a certain.
I think that if you're not testing for it, you're lacking. I would know.
But I would say this though. Definitely, like with some plants, the thing that comes to me, which is not super relevant to cannabis, is like salt grass. Salt grass takes up tons of salt, as the name implies, and that's a defense mechanism both against saline conditions and against things that want to eat it. So it's not like, it's not sort of out of plausibility that like plants would have it as a part of their metabolism or part of their tissue. It's.
Yeah. Have you ever been by the sea on a really windy day, about half a mile in, you could smell the salt in the air.
We live very close to the ocean, believe it or not.
Yeah, so all those plants would be dead if the shit was deadly. So it's obviously
it's a foliar.
Yeah,
it's a foliar. Ocean.
You guys
spray.
Ever see that episode of Star Trek where they get to that planet that has no more salt left, and it's their currency, and it's like there's like they have to like mine, they have like a bucket of salt. And that's all they have.
What episode
dude, it's so good.
This
is like Shatner
Is this Deep Space Nine or the
no,
original series?
Pre-Deep Space?
I just gotta make a idiocracy quote and say electrolytes is what the plants
Uh,
crave.
That's
Gatorade.
right.
Feed him Gatorade.
Gatorade.
Maybe
It was called
Idiocracy was ahead of its
Brondo
time.
in the movie.
Yeah.
Brondo, yeah.
Yeah. It's like yellow Gatorade, right? It's pretty much what it was.
They're pretty much giving it like alluding to that product.
Yeah.
So
Functional nutrients is what it's called. Functional, not essential. So it's
Okay.
functional, but it's not essential. Okay, so I've settled. I'm okay. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
it's all semantics at the end of the day, and I think that it's really hard to get soil with no sodium. Like I use a lot of soils that have animal inputs. I used to use blood meal and bone meal, and all those meals have sodium, and the plants grew just fine. So I'm not like thinking that it's a terrible thing. I do think that at a certain level of anything, it's too much, and it can become, having issues with like water uptake and things like that.
The word
But,
has is doing a lot of work in that sentence, right? Like has could mean 0.001, ppm. It could mean 100. It could mean 10, right? So like, it's kind of a variable thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's the thing that I'm saying is it's there, and I don't really necessarily worry too much about it one way or the other.
Yeah.
How about some pepper to spice things up a little? A little salt, little pepper.
Little salt, little pepper. I don't know. Maybe you'll get some
I like
beta
it.
caryophyllene in your. And there's also, I found out, pinene in pepper. So who knows? Maybe it'll lead to something. You got to try that one out and let us know how it goes. But we're
Pepper's a
at that.
plant, right? It could go in the compost, right?
You can compost a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
Well, I want to say we've only got 4 minutes left, and there's the 5 of us remaining. But I want to give it over to Matthew Gates to give his final thoughts and shout out.
Yeah, I have to echo Brandon's points about liking the fact that we are here regularly, week to week for the most part, and that we have continued to have really great conversations about a variety of topics. And the chat is more and more becoming my favorite aspect about the show, just seeing the interactions and the people that I've seen before, although I have said this as well. Anyways, if you want to see more integrated pest management content, you can find it on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, which is where I've been putting a lot of my best sort of content, in my opinion, especially my long form cannabis, global cannabis integrated pest management videos and my pest primers. You can also find my content and other scientists who I like to retweet and talk to about various pest related things and insect related things and fungi related things and bacteria related things on Twitter at SyncAngel. And you can also find me on Instagram at SyncAngel.
Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your content outside of the show, and I also appreciate your input while you're here with us live. And I want to jump to a quick question that I forgot to get to while we were on the show, but it doesn't need to lead to a super large discussion. If anybody has thoughts on it before they do the sign out, they could throw them in there. Somebody said, with LEDs, is it better to raise them or dim them? Personally, I would prefer to dim them because they run more efficiently while they're dimmed. And running them further away, you're gonna have to run more to get the same FD. So dimming, I think, is often a better option. But if you can raise them and they're not dimmable or whatever, like if you just feel like raising them, then go ahead and raise them. If for some reason your plants aren't reacting well to the dimming versus raising it, you just gotta kind of listen to what your plants do. But with that said, I'm gonna pass it over to Aaron and see if he has any thoughts on that, and then he can give his final shout out.
Shade cloth. They sell this stuff that can actually reduce the exact amount of light that you want to reduce. So we use it all the time in outdoor farming, big ag. So I recommend that. You could get a small piece and put it right over your light, and then test your PPFDs or however you R meter or whatever, however you test your lighting.
You're growing your plants like big ag?
I saw somebody doing that in their racks for their clones because the LEDs were too intense. So they actually threw shade cloth like over the top of the domes, and they were having a ton of success with it.
I do that with clones.
I've kind of did that. I put paper towel over my dome because it was way too bright. Yeah, because I switched from the fluorescence to the LEDs, and it is a world of difference. Yeah.
Yeah. What were you saying, Matt? I'm sorry.
I was joking about how you're using techniques from big ag to grow your cannabis. Now it's out. Now I've said that, and now it's out live, and that soundbite exists. So
no, I'm not big ag.
Aaron uses big ag techs to grow his cannabis.
I am Monsanto.
Yes. By using shade cloth.
People like to take leaps, but no, that's just, we got to use the resources available. And if you've had an experience with agriculture that is applicable, please share, right?
It's a totally valid way to go about things. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So the American one, you are up next.
Well, let me.
Well,
hold on.
Aaron didn't
Oh,
get to
shit,
go,
sorry.
so
Hold
yeah,
on.
let him finish.
I jumped in. I'm high. I wasn't paying attention there. Aaron, go ahead.
I'm Aaron the Grower. I'll go fast. I'm Aaron the Grower. ATG Acres on Instagram, ATG Acres on YouTube. I invented the plant packer. I do light deprivation cannabis, and I've been growing for 15 years. Thank you very much for having me, and I love you guys.
Thanks again for joining us. ATGacres.com. You can find some awesome stuff from the plant packer to some cool merch, shirts, and other things like that. I've heard that they're very comfortable and that the plant packer, in my opinion, is the best way to send a clone. So shout out to Aaron for making that available to the community. Next up, we got the American one.
Yes, I'm the American one on YouTube and the American one _ Keens on IG. If you search the American one, there'll be a little guy with an American top hat. That would most likely be me. And yeah, definitely check out Aaron, atgacres.com, and check into Jack Greenstock's new book. It's awesome. And if you need some IPM, Matthew Gates, and Sour D, nice to meet you, kinda. I came in a little late, and it was great having you on board. You should jump in like a New Yorker sometimes. I'm sorry I cog the convo sometimes, guys.
I'm learning it from him, like I'm doing it right now.
Now, we always appreciate your input, Tao. Honestly, I think sometimes in my head you don't jump in enough. So it's like I love hearing from everybody. I try to get everyone their time to shine. And with a lot of people on, sometimes it's hard to do. Tonight we had a little bit lighter panel, and I feel like everybody kind of got a moment to jump in there. Sour D had some good questions, and I'm glad he stayed with us the entire time. With that said, Sour D, do you want to give any
It was
final
a really
thoughts
good
and
night tonight.
shout
Thanks.
out? Yeah, thank you for joining us. And we've been talking about bringing a person from the chat into the panel for a long time, and we're glad to have you. So, Sardi, final thoughts and shout out.
I really appreciate that. You guys made me feel right at home. Hope I didn't bogart the conversation at all. Tao, it was a pleasure to meet you too, my friend. The whole panel, it's been great. I had a great time. Chat, I couldn't really figure out how to keep up with the chat on YouTube, so sorry if I missed a few things. But yeah, this was a really good time. I mean, I had a great time. You guys were all cool. If anyone wants to follow me, it's Sour Diesel Tangy on IG. Feel free to hit me up on Gmail also, same exact handle. And yeah, Sour Diesel Tangy. Just had a great time. Wanted to say thank you to everybody.
Thanks for being
you to
here,
the panel.
Sour D.
Thanks to Jack for jumping in and taking the reins of the Cheap Home Grow podcast. It was awesome, man. You guys are awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you.
We're happy to be here, man, and we're happy to have you. You've been a longtime supporter, like you said at the beginning, and I recognize your name and everything. So obviously, I was excited to be able to get you on and have the exclusive. I guess your first time showing up to a podcast, and I love that you always tag a bunch of us in your posts so we can kind of watch your grows as they've come along. It's come a long way from the tents to the really like indoor grow room setup. So it's been really awesome to watch your grow evolve along with so many of the people in this amazing community. Shout out to everybody in the chat. There was like 150 plus at one point. So cheers to all of you. If you want to support, just hit that thumbs up before we go. I'm at Jack Greenstock on Instagram, Cannabuzz, and Jack _ Greenstock on Twitter. I want to give a big shout out to the Michigan Bros Grow Show. That's where Spartan just headed out to. And there's also Candid with Canna Queen. She interviews people on Sunday nights at this time on YouTube. Awesome cannabis community, tons of other content producers. So definitely go and give them a follow and check out if you haven't already. Love all the support and happy to share it with the other parts of the community. So thank you everybody so much for coming. This is Jack Greenstock signing out. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday. Peace and love, everybody. For Dr. MJ, I'll say grower love. Sorry you couldn't make it tonight, but he has a good reason. I don't want to put it out there for the whole world, but everything's all right with him. I just want to say grower love from Dr. MJ and the rest of the panel who couldn't join us. Peace and love.